Something unexpected is happening at the biggest World Cup in history, and it has nothing to do with goals, nothing to do with trophies, and nothing to do with who wins the tournament. Instead, fans around the world keep talking about the same thing, the host countries. Because while the United States was expected to dominate the conversation, many supporters are finding themselves drawn to something else entirely, Canada and Mexico. The 2026 World Cup was supposed to be America's moment. After all, the United States is hosting the majority of the matches, the biggest stadiums, the biggest audiences, and the World Cup final itself. On paper, it should have been the unquestioned center of attention. But football isn't played on paper, and tournaments aren't remembered only for the matches. They're remembered for the atmosphere, the people, the cities, the experiences that happen outside the stadium just as much as the ones that happen inside. That's where something fascinating has started to emerge. Because while the United States provides the scale, Canada and Mexico are providing something many fans value just as much: personality, passion, and a sense of football culture that feels impossible to manufacture. For the first time in history, the World Cup is being hosted by 3 nations at once. But instead of one tournament spread across 3 countries, it sometimes feels like 3 completely different World Cups happening at the same time. And as supporters travel across North America, they're beginning to notice those differences. Some are subtle, some are impossible to miss, and together, they're creating one of the most interesting stories of the entire tournament. So, how did Canada and Mexico become 2 of the biggest winners of World Cup 2026 before the tournament has even reached its defining moments? Let's break it down. To understand why this is happening, you first need to understand something about football. Unlike the NFL, unlike the NBA, unlike almost any other major sporting event, the World Cup doesn't belong to one country, it belongs to the world. And when fans travel thousands of miles to follow their team, they're not just buying a ticket to a match, they're buying an experience, they're buying memories, they're buying a story they'll tell for the rest of their lives. That's why atmosphere matters so much, and few countries understand football atmosphere better than Mexico. Football isn't simply popular there, it's part of everyday life. The sport lives in neighborhoods, schools, public squares, restaurants, and families. Entire cities change when the national team plays. When Mexico hosts a World Cup match, it doesn't feel like an event being brought into the city. It feels like the city itself becomes the event. That's a huge difference, and fans notice it immediately. Then there's Canada, a country that many football fans underestimated for years, because when people think of Canadian sports, they usually think of hockey first. But something has changed. Over the last decade, football has exploded across Canada. Youth participation has grown. Professional clubs have developed, the national team has improved dramatically, and perhaps most importantly, the country's football culture has matured. Cities like Toronto and Vancouver aren't just hosting matches, they're hosting communities. People from virtually every football-playing nation on Earth already live there, which creates something special, a World Cup atmosphere that feels genuinely international. Walk through those cities during the tournament, and you'll hear dozens of languages, see dozens of flags, and meet fans from every corner of the globe. That's exactly what the World Cup is supposed to feel like. Now compare that to the expectations surrounding the United States. The United States isn't struggling because of infrastructure. Quite the opposite. The stadiums are incredible. The transportation systems are massive. The technology is world-class. The commercial power is unmatched. If this tournament was judged purely on size, America would win easily. But football supporters don't only remember size, they remember feeling. Think about March Madness. Nobody remembers which arena had the nicest parking lot. They remember the energy, the madness, the unexpected moments, the feeling of being there. That's what World Cup supporters are chasing. And that's where Canada and Mexico have been earning so much praise. They've managed to create something that feels authentic, something that feels connected to football's roots. Meanwhile, the United States often finds itself facing a different challenge: expectation. Because when you're hosting most of the matches, people expect perfection. Every problem gets magnified, every complaint gets amplified, every criticism spreads instantly across social media. And that's exactly what's happening. The reality is that America isn't failing as a host, but it is being held to a completely different standard. The biggest host always is. And while discussions online often focus on controversies, Something else is happening at the same time. Millions of supporters are discovering Canada. Millions more are rediscovering Mexico. And both countries are making a powerful impression. Not because they have more matches, not because they have bigger stadiums, but because they've managed to capture something that football values above almost everything else: connection. The feeling that the tournament belongs to the people. And when supporters feel that connection, they talk about it, they share it, they celebrate it, which is why so many fans are beginning to say the same thing. The biggest surprise of World Cup 2026 might not be what happens on the pitch. It might be what happens outside it. And that's why this story is bigger than football. Because when people look back at World Cup 2026 years from now, they won't only remember the champion. They won't only remember the goals. They won't only remember the final. They'll remember how the tournament felt, the cities they visited, the people they met, the atmosphere they experienced. That's the hidden competition happening at every World Cup. Not just which team wins, but which host nation leaves the strongest impression. And right now, Canada and Mexico are making a very strong case. Not because they're richer, not because they're hosting more matches, but because they've leaned into what makes football special: community, culture, passion, and identity. The United States still has every opportunity to create unforgettable moments. After all, it's hosting the majority of the tournament, the biggest crowds, the biggest stage, and the World Cup final itself. No country will have a bigger spotlight, but sometimes the biggest spotlight creates the biggest pressure, because the larger the expectations, the harder they are to satisfy. Meanwhile, Canada and Mexico have found themselves in a different position: less pressure, more authenticity, and in many cases, more goodwill from traveling supporters. That's why this tournament is becoming such a fascinating case study. 3 countries, 1 World Cup, 3 completely different football experiences, and each one is telling its own story. The United States is showcasing scale, Canada is showcasing inclusivity, Mexico is showcasing football passion at its purest. And together, they're creating a World Cup unlike anything we've ever seen before. The real winner of this debate won't be decided by headlines, it won't be decided by social media, and it won't be decided by commentators. It will be decided by the millions of supporters who return home after the tournament and tell the world about their experience. Because that's how World Cups are remembered, not through official reports, but through stories. Stories shared between friends, families, and future generations of fans. And if the early reactions are any indication, Canada and Mexico may end up being remembered as 2 of the most beloved hosts in modern World Cup history. So now that you know why Canada and Mexico are winning over World Cup fans, you're ready for the next level. Click the video on your screen right now to find out why the 48-team World Cup format could completely change football forever.